Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Certainty Talks. On this show, we talk about certainty, a topic that feels more important today than ever before, but all in all, always an important topic. We have my good friend and business partner in the Whale Club here, Paul Sparks, not only a successful real estate investor, but also a certified certainty advisor. Now, we do this show because a wise man once asked a question. If you look at the last 3 years of your business and took all the months that were negative and turned them into zeros, well, what happened to your bottom line? And that wise man is Dan Nicholson. Now, we're also here to help you achieve financial certainty through real estate by rigging the game in your favor. I'm also on a mission to create 100 millionaires. The information on this podcast alone is enough to help you become a millionaire in the next 5 to 7 years. You'll take consistent action. You will become one. If you get value today, please share this episode. That way we can all grow together. And you guys are going to hear us talk about some things that might sound a little weird, might sound confusing. That's okay. Keep the loop open. I promise you it will make sense later on. And please write your takeaways in the live chat. And after you thought about it, put in your 6-word updates in the comments below. So today's title is How to Know When Your Business Will Break. And before we get into that, Paul, what do you got for your 6-word update? Mhm.
To what I do well. So that's my 6-word
Oh,
update today.
awesome. For me, my 6-word update is calling bullshit is a learnable skill. So you sent me a link to some videos, and it's like, I love what these guys say because this is what I already do, but he teaches you how to say it in a way that doesn't hurt people's feelings,
Yeah.
right? So I was like, I'm already good at the first part, protecting their feelings. That one becomes a little bit more challenging. So I'm super excited about going through this college course that you sent me. I'm gonna
Yeah.
audit it.
Yeah,
So
and we have this available inside of our Whale Club community. So, this was what was it? Seattle U? Is that where it's at? I forget. It's been
somewhere
about a
in
year.
Washington.
Somewhere in Washington, yeah. And it's an entire class called calling bullshit and how to identify when people are um, oftentimes exaggerating or being hyperbolic or just flat out lying. I just actually I've got it right here. I just got through finished reading this book, Talking to Strangers, and Malcolm Gladwell talks about this, how like there's a lot of bullshit floating around, right? And how do we sift through that? And this
Mhm.
was a fantastic course. So we've got that available in our community. If you guys want to get in there and grab it and listen to it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Not only is there a lot of it out there, we don't call BS on it. We contribute to it, and so on. So maybe that could potentially be a future episode. We'll just kind of talk about that topic in specifically.
Can we say
Uh,
bullshit on this show? I didn't know if we could say bullshit or not.
well, we've already crossed that threshold. It was part of my 6-word update. I don't know what else to do here. So we were talking about some of the challenges, right, in growing our businesses. Is that as we grow and scale, we run into these challenges. What I know now wasn't easily preventable or something to be completely aware of, but we didn't. So I would grow when it was by myself. I just worked really hard, but it was fine. Hired an employee. We sit within, if we're not within talking distance, we are at least within shouting distance of one another. And communication wasn't terrible. It wasn't excellent, but it wasn't terrible. But once we added a couple more employees, potentially a remote location, things got really hard. So talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so Dan references this as part of one of his growth principles in rigging the game. So if you've read Rigging the Game, you've probably heard of the rule of 3 and 10. And let me tell you a little bit of history and backstory on the rule of 3 and 10. So there was a guy named Hiroshi Mikitani. And Hiroshi Mikitani started a company called Rakuten. Sure, a lot of people who are listening to this are familiar with that. It was a Japanese company, and they are, multi-billion-dollar company now. He's been a very, very successful business owner, entrepreneur, and he said he was the one that coined this term, the rule of 3 and 10. And what he said is basically everything breaks at roughly every 3rd and 10th step. And he used that philosophy to build Rakuten and to build these, businesses. I believe he owns another couple businesses. I don't know enough about him. I was just studying the rule of 3 of 10. But the idea being every time your business goes from, let's say, 1 employee to 3 employees, everything's going to break.
Mm-hmm.
Every time your business goes from 3 employees to 10 employees, everything's going to break. Another way of saying that too might be every time your business goes from 3 deals, you go from 3 deals a month to 10 deals a month, everything's going to break. The employees, the structure, the CRM that you use, the marketing that you're using, the sales, all of the infrastructure that we use to build our businesses. It's actually fairly predictable that every time, we hit a 3rd step or a 10th step, he actually says this as at multiples of 3 and powers of 10. But for simplifying this, we'll just say that every, time your business triples or increases by an order of magnitude of 10, it's pretty predictable. Those things are going to break.
Right. And you were talking about like one of the commandments we have or principles we follow is preventing bad things from happening. So how do I apply this principle to prevent bad things from happening?
Yeah, well, I think first is this just highlights, I think, the power of the Certainty operating system. Is Dan has done such a fantastic job of giving a roadmap on how to build and grow a business. So first of all, I think it just takes recognizing it. Maybe we all intuitively understand that what gets you to 3 deals a month is not going to get you to 10 deals a month. You're going to have to reinvent the business along the way. But I think it first starts by recognizing that that's the case. So, or you'll do what I did, which is you'll get there and you'll be like, why did everything break? Why is this not working anymore?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I'm kind of thinking there's Larry Yatch. I had the great honor of being mentored by him, right? The former Navy SEAL. And he kind of goes through like there's these 4 dials, right? There's the marketing, sales, there's the fulfillment, and then the administrative components of it, right? So there's 4 dials that are all critical to a successful transaction, a successful a process where everyone walks away not pissed off, right? That's the standard. I would love for everyone to be elated and happy all the time, but really, if everyone can go home without being stressed, like that is the barrier for success here. And so as a business owner, I don't ask questions like, how can I service 3 times as many deals? I always ask, Paul, how do I triple my business? How do I get 3 times more transactions? There's never a follow-up question like, hey, how can I get 3 more transactions? How can I make sure I have my team prepared for it? And how can I make sure that the administrative team can make sure they can fulfill all the orders and that, again, everyone's happy, that we can make sure we get 5-star reviews from every single homeowner and repeat the process.
Well, and yeah, so it's like if you completely blow, let's say, marketing out of the water and you're trying to triple your outbound marketing. Let's say you're going from $10,000 a month in marketing spend and you're like, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're cold calling and texting right now, but we want to add direct mail. We want to add pay-per-click, and we want to increase that budget to $30,000 a month because we just had 2 or 3 incredible months, high watermark stuff, right? High month paradigm. We talked about that on
the
this
new
show.
record that is now our new standard.
Right. And so what do all of us real estate investors do? We're like, okay, well, I'm going to take that money, I'm going to reinvest it back into my business, and I'm going to grow. And, we have a phrase on our team that I like to say. It's like driving traffic over a bridge that's not stable. Yeah, we might be able to get a bunch more cars to drive over this bridge. I get that. But if the bridge collapses, what good does that do? Right. And
Yeah.
so it comes back to your Larry H comment. Like if you're focusing on increasing your marketing by a magnitude of 3, it's fairly predictable at a really high level to say you're going to create multiple breakpoints at certain, in the sales, in the fulfillment, or in the
Right.
administration side.
Yeah. I mean, we got the answer rate might go down, speed the lead might go down. We might be spinning their wheels. They might be going to appointments all over the valley and not able to coordinate because they're going to if we're running in a business exactly right and we're able to triple the marketing to get triple the leads, our salespeople have to go on 3 times as many appointments if everything goes perfectly. And we just assume our 1 or 2 or 3 salespeople that were able to handle X amount of leads, it's just going to step up and get 3 times as many leads. And that should be nothing bad, nothing wrong can happen here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And personnel is an interesting thing, right? The salesperson, and I know I don't want this to sound. This is just going to sound like it sounds. I'm just going to say it like it is. The person who gets you to 3 deals a month,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost, I would suggest it's like unlikely they are the person that's going to get you to 10 deals a month.
Right.
Because they're probably a really high contributor. They're probably someone who plays well by themselves. But what you need to get to 10 deals a month is a very different profile of a person. You need more of a manager. You need a
Mm-hmm.
sales manager as opposed to a headhunter, right? Like a sniper, that
Mm-hmm.
salesperson who is so good on their own. They're getting 3 deals a month and they're crushing it.
Yeah. So then you got that. And then let's just assume we magically figured out that part and we got it right. We magically got that second part right. We got marketing and triple. We spent triple on marketing and we get triple as the leads. And we managed to get the sales right. And the sales guys don't lose their minds. We have 3 times as many escrows. And we just expect our team to just handle it.
Yeah. We expect not only the team to handle it, but we also expect all the processes and systems to also be able to handle it. This
Right.
makes me think about Stephanie Betters with Left Main.
Mm-hmm.
And, the product that she has is probably overkill for someone doing 1 to 2 deals a month.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it might even be overkill for someone doing 3 deals a month. You may not need all of the systems needed to do that. But it certainly can be a massively, hugely beneficial tool if you're doing 10 deals a month. It also can support 30 deals a month, an Eric
Right.
Brewer size business, right?
Right.
And so part of one of the things that I started thinking about as I was growing my business past 3 deals a month was, well, I'm probably going to have a break point at 10. Do I really want to spend all this time in finding a CRM that could do 10 deals a month? Or do I want to overbuild this so that I can grow past 10 deals a month and I don't have to circle back to like, now we got to redo this again?
You got to build
So
another CRM.
build another CRM. I mean, that's such a huge pain. It'll set you back 6 months, right? It takes a
Right.
while to get that stuff built in. So, these are the types of things that as a business owner, if you're aware of it, if you can predict that, hey, things are likely to break at a certain point in the business as you're scaling and growing. Okay, so what do we do with that information? And back to what you were saying about the parenting frame, it's really, well, how do we prevent bad things from happening? It might mean just, first of all, being aware that this is
Yeah.
coming, not being surprised when all of a sudden when you grow sales or you grow marketing and you grow sales, and then all of a sudden your contracts are dropping out left and right because maybe you don't have dispo dialed in.
Right.
Well, that's predictable.
A lot of people are feeling that pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's a couple things that I wrote here as just like signs that you're coming up to a break point. I knew that I was coming up to a break point because I started to resent my business a little bit. You know, I don't know if
Mhm.
that's if anybody else has felt that, but like, you know, one thing about me is that I'm not an excellent operator. I don't really want to be. I'm more of that salesperson that can get those deals, 3 deals a month. But if we grew to 10, I would. That's not me. Like that's not. That's I'm the person that would not make it in that new organization.
Yeah.
Um, so, part of like my 6 word up to date today was reducing complexity to play my game. So I think it goes back a little bit to like, you got to know your own strengths. You got to know your own biases. You got to know what you're good at, because I grew my business and I started being like, I don't like this. It's breaking. It's causing me to not play my game. And I started realizing, oh, right. It's because you grew to a point where when you were doing 1 to 2 deals a month, but then you went to like however many we were doing, things started to break. It started to cause me a bunch of, resentment. Do I really like this? Do I really want to do
Mhm.
this? Is this what I want? And so that was one of the first signs for me.
Well, Gary Harper talks about this, right? He talks about the five like stages of growth. First stage is, solopreneur, right? We all have been there. Stage two is like you're growing and like this kind of sucks. And then stage three is you stabilized and now you got a business that it's fun again, right? But it kind of sucks to go from stage one to stage three because you got to go through this valley of death in stage two.
Yeah.
And then when you go from where stage three to like an Eric Brewer level, right? You've got to go from stage four to stage five. And stage five is great because you're not actively involved in your business and it's just printing money. But to get there, you got to go through stage four where you got to deal with all this management, processes, procedures, everything's gonna be dialed in. And if it's not a 10 out of 10, someone is getting screamed at. Like it just causes all these massive complexities. And
Yeah.
so, and what Gary talks about is it does not make sense to go to stage five unless you've got massive clarity on your purpose.
Yeah.
If this is not hitting home spiritually or massive fulfillment to grow to have a business that large, if it's not hitting a purpose that drives massive fulfillment, it doesn't make sense. It's better to stay at a level where you're doing that kind of business you want to do and you don't have to lose sleep. So
Yeah. So well said. I'm sure Gary would, um, he'd be like, the rule of 3 of 10 is exactly what I see in practice. Right.
yeah.
And it's not like I used to take it as, I struggle with comparison. I see other people who are building these incredible businesses. And because I'm so competitive, I want what they have. It's like, the kid who didn't want to play with the toy until another kid is playing with the toy. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, that's my toy. I want that toy. And I struggle with that really, really bad. And so I have a tendency to do things just to prove to other people that I can do them.
hmm
And again, that's not a great way to build a business, right? So
No.
I found that I actually don't want to build and scale a business. I started bumping up against that next level and saying, "Ooh, I don't like this. It's starting to get more complex. The reason I got into this in the first place completely changed when I got to a different level in the business. Now it's about something else." And I realized, okay, well, I don't really want that. So why don't we reduce the complexity, pull back, and keep our team small? And, that took a little while for me to like get over that in my own head.
hmm
But boy, does it feel much more light, being where I'm at. I look for 1 deal a month now. That's it. It just needs to be $100,000 or more, right?
Right.
I'm looking for bigger deals.
Whale
And
hunter.
again, it just allows me to play. Yeah, it allows me to play my game. So
So for
predictable.
someone listening right now, right, whether it's going from one deal a month to 3 deals a month, or from 3 deals a month to 10 deals a month, like what are like we're telling them here's where things are gonna break. So what can they do to prevent them from breaking? Or is it just like it's gonna break and that's just the way it is?
Yes, it's going to break, and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
That's kind of what he's saying with the rule of three and
Yeah.
10. That's been my experience.
Yeah. So
Is
so then I guess all we can do then at this moment. So let you guys know that if something bad's gonna happen, be prepared for it. But and it's kind of like we use the turkey story, right? And I'm totally taking this from Anti-Fragile here, right? Like The turkey's got a great life. From the day the turkey is hatched, they're fed, they're taken care of, they're provided a home, the home is clean on a regular basis. Everything's pretty good. All resources that are required to sustain a good life are readily available. And then one day, a surprise occurs. That one day, you get pulled over to the chopping block, literally, and your head gets chopped off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. He wasn't preventing bad things from happening, was he?
He was definitely not preventing bad things from happening. But that's kind of what you're saying for the rule of 3 and 10 is just like things are going to be good. They're going to be good. And you hit the point where you're just going to run into a wall. And that's just the way it is. Be mentally prepared, whether financially or whatever, that something bad is going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're not here to sugarcoat it. Business is
Yeah.
hard. Like,
Mhm.
if you don't understand that, then you probably shouldn't be in business.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. As your business is growing, don't be the turkey. Like, recognize that there's going to be certain things that are going to come.
Mhm.
And what we would rather do is not, turn a blind eye to it and just like be closed off and hope that this hopium, right? We're all hopped
Yeah.
up on hopium, hoping that it's always going to be great. Well, that's not what a good business owner does,
Yeah.
according to Hiroshi Makitani, right? The
Yeah.
idea here is if we know it's coming, what can we do to prepare ourselves mentally? What can we do to prepare our team? I had a couple other signs here that it might be coming.
Sure.
One of the
Go for
things
it.
that I started noticing is that, well, first of all, is like you might have a little bit of resentment for your business, right? Doesn't mean that you shouldn't push through it. But what I'm saying is you might be butting up against one of these break points. If you loved your business and then all of a sudden it's becoming like a grind and you don't love it anymore, you might be right in the midst of one of these break points, which means you might need to think about reinventing your business. The second thing I wrote was you have less cash, but more revenue, because scaling does not mean necessarily you're more profitable. It just means you're spending more.
It just means
In a
there's
lot
more
of cases.
revenue. Yeah.
Yeah, so you might actually have less cash
Right.
as you're growing your business. That could be a sign that you're butting up against one of these breakpoints. Third thing I wrote, and I've got 4 of these. So first was you want to shrink your business. Like, you don't like the size of the business that you're at. It was easier when it was smaller. Okay, that could be you're running up into a break point. Second is less cash, but more revenue. Third thing is your employees are dominating your time, right? So when you were small, when you had a small team, you had a lead manager, an acquisitions manager, and a dispo, right? And it's like, well, it's very predictable.
Mm-hmm.
But now you dumped in triple the marketing costs. So you've got to go out and get another lead manager, maybe even 2, which means now you've got to have at least another salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And now that you're doing all these additional transactions, you bring on a transaction coordinator and you start adding all of these complexities to your business. And these employees are just like vampires for your time.
Yeah.
You can tell how I feel about employees. It's not a bad thing. It's just like saying, if you start realizing, Randy Massengale said that every employee you add is adding a minimum of 4 hours to your work week.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got 5 people directly reporting to you, and let's say you have 10 people reporting to you now, you're probably spending 40 hours a week just dealing with employees. Whereas when you had 3, you only were dealing with it with 12 people.
Right.
So now you're not necessarily the, visionary salesperson. You've become Mr. Manager, Mr. or Mrs. Manager. And you're like, well, I didn't want to become Mr. or Mrs. Manager. It's like, well, that's what the rule of 10 is trying to tell us. It's very predictable.
What's the 4th sign?
4th thing is, because of that, you spending less time in your genius zone. So I started realizing that as my team was growing, I was becoming more of a manager, and it gave me less time to be in my genius zone. And for me, that's sales, raising money, finding $100,000 deals and up, like working on this big vision that you and I have for Whale Club and
Right.
bridging the worlds of blockchain and real estate and all this sort of stuff. And that's my genius zone. But I found myself being a manager.
Yeah. So there's a few different things I want to touch on here because you talk about cash traps. So that was like the first 10 years of my career. Like every time we grew, there's less and less cash. Right. The question we've asked is like, I'm making a lot of freaking money, but where the heck is it? Right. Maybe even more colorful words. And they were talking about scaling. Wholesaling scaling, right, is one thing. Flipping scaling is a whole nother thing, right? So when you're scaling flipping, there's substantial amounts of cash out on the street for every single flip. So you're flipping one house a month, or maybe you're flipping a house one every 3 months. Cash goes out, cash comes back, and you can do this all day. Then you're doing one house a month, but hey, cash goes out, cash comes back in. Then you get to 2 houses. Now there's money out on the street for 2 houses, but you can kind of get it going. And then you got money out on the street for 3 houses. When you're doing 3 houses, right, 10%, let's just say you found a really good hard money partner, Yavi, for example, right? You put 10% down for 3 different properties. That's 30% of a house, right? So you're profitable, right? You're showing month in, month out, you're running a profitable business. And you've got no cash to show for it because it's out on the streets. Balance sheet looks great. P&L looks great. Cash flow is being strangled. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize. So you go from 1 to 3 and 3 to 10, and then every once in a while, this is why I was always fearful of flipping. As you grew and scaled, you always take the last profit, put in this other property because you got to scale, you got to grow. We're not scaling and growing. What are you doing, right? At least that's the way it was until I learned about rigging in the game, right? And then you have a black swan event, like the Fed rate hike, and all those profits you put out there have just disappeared altogether. All at once, kind of like a scene from Avengers, right? When Thanos snapped his thumb or snapped his fingers.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that because the risk profile of the business as you continue to grow it and scale it completely changes as well. What's the risk profile when you're doing 3 flips a month? Or let's just say 3 flips a year versus 10 flips a year. Ooh, now you are really significantly more susceptible to a black swan event, as you mentioned. But oftentimes in our brains, we don't make that switch. And this is part of why the rule of 3 and 10 is so powerful. And we have to look at it across risk, like employees, culture, systems and processes, cash flow. Like it's going to affect every aspect of the business.
Yeah.
A 3.
You said something on the Whale Club call the other day, right? Was that we more often, more businesses go out of business for indigestion versus starvation.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is, in this context, how I would think of that is the more complex a system, the higher risk of indigestion. Right. Yeah. It comes back to the whole system reliability thing. And I don't know if we've talked about, sometimes I forget where we talk about things because we talk so much now and all of our whale calls and all that. But the whole idea is system reliability essentially says everything is less than 1. You can't have 110% reliable system. It can only be less than 100 or 100 or less. And so the way that this works is if you make somebody calls your business, they want to sell you a house, and 90% of the time you pick that phone up, let's say, and there's obviously a lot of other variables here. I'm just simplifying this to, make it easy. 90% of the time you pick the phone up, and then 90% of the time you're closing. That'd be a killer close rate, let's just say.
Oh, I would kill for that rate. Yes.
Yeah. So in that scenario, the system reliability is actually 0.9 times 0.9, which is 0.81. When you start adding more things to the system, it's multiplicative, which means the reliability is going to go down. Even if you added something that was 99% reliable, it's still going to go down. So the idea here is um, the more complex, the more things that need to go right in your business, the less likely that everything goes right. And
Yep.
I think we all intuitively understand that, but that is something that you're going to face as you grow a business. You're going to almost necessarily need to increase the complexity,
Hmm.
which means you're adding more things to the system that need to go right. And so the likelihood that it goes right is going to slowly go down. Um, and so if you're interested in growing and scaling a business, it's helpful to know that before time, right? So you
Right.
can plan for it. And I think that's probably what we should talk about for the remainder of this show is like, what do we do about that? Okay,
Mhm.
knowing what we know now, the investor frame says, knowing what I know now, what do we need to change about our business so that we can be prepared for these breakpoints?
So before you do that, I want to share another thing. So please remember everything we just talked about. Maybe write it down.
I
So
got it.
guys, these are what we talk about, right, on our whale club call. So like, the last 7 weeks on our last cohort, I mean, Paul's talking about like getting clarity, getting your data together, helping you get absolute clarity on your financials, even so that you can effectively, make the right decisions for your business. On top of that, we just put a wealth assessment together. So if you're interested, go to wealthevaluation.com. I wrote something out. It's about 6 pages, but it helps you figure out your current net worth, your budget, right? Like I give you everything you need to know. Ask yourself to figure out your budget and then figure out where you want to go and why it's so important. So again, I wrote out 6 pages, kind of give you the thought process on how to create wealth. And then we have our cheat sheet for rigging the game, which I'm still waiting for the poster to be made. But you know, um, Dan Nicholson's book, Rigging the Game. Once you've read the book, there's a lot of incredible concepts in there, and the easiest way to reference those concepts is to have a cheat sheet. So go to whaleclubfreestuff.com to get that cheat sheet, and then there was something else I was gonna say, but go ahead to your point.
Um, that cheat sheet is, I mean, incredibly helpful. Steve always starts this show off by saying that we are speaking like a slightly different language. You might not be familiar with all of the terms that we use, things like the parenting frame, the investor frame, the rule of 3 and 10, the 4 lenses. We're not just making this stuff up out of thin air, right?
Right.
I learned all of this directly from Dan Nicholson, who wrote that book. I went through a very extensive process for him to teach it to me. Steve has been working, through this in the same way for the last, 8 months. And that's where we get it from. So if you want to learn more about these things, first of all, go pick up Rigging the Game. Once you've done that and you want to see all these, the frames, the issue processors, the growth principles, all this stuff, put in a nice, easy graph to make it easier for you to like ask your brain the questions as you step through business decisions. Oh, it's been a huge tool for us. And so we use it all the time in the Whale Club. My team uses it and I highly recommend it. Like Steve said, you can get that at whaleclubfreestuff.com. You can just go download it, right? So
Yep.
check that out. But
I remember what I was gonna say. So if you guys just think about, right, like when you guys were a solopreneur, when you were first starting, right? If you didn't know what you were doing, you went out and created bandit signs, you put your cell phone number on it, and when they called, you got the call. That's it. That's 100% reliability, right? The only way it doesn't work is if the wind blows the bandit side down or the city walks around and picks up your sign. But beyond that, that is as close to 100% reliability as possible. And then we get call rail numbers, and then we put them on postcards. Paul knows about the postcard situation, right? So we have different phone numbers on postcards. We've got different phone numbers on websites. And then when they call in, it goes in the call rail. And then maybe call rail's working, maybe call rail's not. Then it goes to your lead manager. Maybe your lead manager's working, maybe they're not. But we went from all these systems that are good systems, but none of them are 100% reliable. So is it necessary? Absolutely. But your cell phone on the bandit sign is the most reliable. But we have these complexities that are necessary. But just what our point here is the reliability goes down each time we add a point. And to illustrate the point again, Paul, if you don't mind sharing your story again with your postcards.
Sure. Um, here is the risk of this, and we were at our best. We were really only doing about 3 deals a month in Denver. Our deals are much bigger here in this market, so that's a whole different conversation around comparing myself to other people doing 10 deals, and I struggle with that. But point is we're growing this business. We had a lead manager, virtual lead manager. We had all this data that we're paying for. So we want to make sure we're cold calling and we're texting. And then we definitely want to make sure we're sending them direct mail. And then all that has to come in to the CRM, and we got to make sure all our drip systems are set. And, who's working all the leads, and how do I fiddle with all the left main dials to make sure that, it all looks cool so I can look at this dashboard and see all these things. Well, talk about system reliability. I put the wrong phone number on the postcard. And so we're sitting here, I'm spending, months prepping for this. Oh, we got this great CRM. Oh, we're going to hire a new lead manager, and we're going to do all these things, and cold calling and texting and direct mail, yada, yada, yada. What happens to the system reliability when you put the wrong phone number on? And I'm sitting here saying like, well, what's going on? Why is these automations not working? Where are the leads? Where is this? But because there's so many things that need to go right. And one of those is you got to make sure you put the right freaking phone number on the postcard. Like, that's the risk, is now you start adding all of these things that need to go right. And even if you get nine of them right out of 10, but one of them has a 0% reliability because they're not going to be able to get in touch with you because they don't have the right number. What does that do to the reliability of the entire system? What's anything multiplied by 0, Steve?
0.
0. So if you got one goose egg in that complex system, that's a 0. Your entire system is a 0. And that was the moment where I was like, oh man, I don't know if I'm cut out to build this type of business.
Yeah. So sorry to distract you and bring up past trauma. So moving on with your point.
You wear these things. If that hadn't happened, I might still be trying to build that business. Yeah. So, you never know what is, quote, good or bad. At the time I was like, man, this sucks to have just burned $30,000 in direct mail over the course of 2 months. But in hindsight, how long would I have stayed trying to, play somebody else's game before I realized like, that's not your game, Paul. Play a different game. Okay. So obviously Steve and I represent sort of different ends of the spectrum here. Steve has a more complex business, right? And he operates that at a high level. One of the ways he's done that is by finding the who, not the how. I get that question all the time. Well, Paul, why don't you just go out and find the who? Not saying that's not a viable option. It is a viable option, right? They call those people COOs. They call them sales managers. They call them other things, right? Now, part of that is like saying, first thing that you need to consider as we're, how do I reframe this? Ways to combat the rule of 10. One thing is you have to recognize you're going to constantly have to reinvent your business. Constantly. You have to recognize that. You have to be prepared for it. You have to be thinking about it. You can't become the turkey, right? Because otherwise you're exposing yourself to this event where everything just breaks and you're like, what happened? Everything was so good for so long.
All right.
So don't be the turkey. That's number one. Anything you want to add there?
That's basically, I mean, I'm glad I got to read that book, Anti-Fragile, because whenever anyone said don't be a turkey, I always took it as a different context. I don't know if that's the right context, but it has a completely different context for me.
Yeah. So in this case, what that means is anticipate that the breakpoints are coming, especially if you're going from 1 deal to 3 deals. That's such a small, it's like you're tripling the business, but it doesn't seem like that big of a deal to go from 1 to 3, but it is. Yeah. And your systems are going to break right then and there. So start preparing for it. The second thing is, I wrote this as like, leaders drive and support culture within the organization. When I started this business, I didn't know anything about leadership. I was an individual contributor. I was just a salesperson. I sold sales. I was, was a traveling salesperson. Never managed anybody. That was my biggest and first break point, was like, oh, right. If I hire people and I'm just like, yeah, go sell houses. That's what we do on this team.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had sat around and wondered, like, well, why are you guys not selling any houses? It's like, well, Paul, because leaders drive support and culture within the organization. You could probably get away without any culture or leadership at 1 deal a month.
Yeah.
You're not going to get away with it at 3 deals a month. So my first realization is that if you want to grow and scale a business, you've got to start building leaders.
Do we lose him, Manny? Yeah, I see we're still streaming on YouTube, so we'll just gonna kind of continue here. So while we wait for Paul to get back, I want to talk about. Oh wait, he's calling me. So we're gonna do a live troubleshoot. Hang on a second. Hey, Paul. I don't know. We're still going here. I can. We're still on YouTube. You're in. No, you gotta. You're gonna have to pop out and come back in. All right. Man, that was a really good point. I'm sure. All right. So while we wait for him to pop back in, hopefully his computer works. We're talking about 1 to 3. So talk about flips. So just in my own personal experience, my business, right? Like I don't know why. Some people want to grow a big wholesaling company. Some people want to grow a big flipping company. Some people want to grow a big team with a bunch of realtors. I just want a bunch of businesses. I don't know why. I really can't explain it, but that's what I'm most fascinated about. Well, I guess potentially because I love entrepreneurship. So running one business is pretty hard. Running 2 businesses, pretty challenging as well. Once we got to 3 or 4 businesses, we couldn't run it the way we were running before. And so last year, we brought someone in whose sole role was to lead all the businesses. We got one guy who is, we'll call it a COO. We have one COO that supports all the other COOs, right? So talking about complexity, we don't need that. We got one company. But once we got to 3, 4, 5 companies, we needed one additional person to hold all the other businesses accountable. And then the other one, I've got 3 kids. Well, having one kid, pretty good, right? Got 2 parents sharing all the love or being difficult, on one child. It works. Once we had 2 kids, we got 2 adults, 2 children in the house. It's still working. Man, once we had a 3rd kid, I started feeling like I wasn't giving enough love to all 3 kids. The things that worked at 1 kid also worked on 2 kids. Did not work on 3 kids. Someone made the remark. I remember when we found out we were having a 3rd kid. It's like, oh, you're going from a man defense to a zone defense. Like, oh yeah, that sounds about right. So, fortunately, we have enough of an age gap where the older kids can help with the younger one. But at the end of the day, the things that worked at 1 and 2 kids did not work at 3. By the way, had to get a bigger house. I had a house because of this, the horrible financial situation we were in. I had a house where my mortgage rate got as low as 2%. I was never selling that property. It just never made sense. I don't care how small, tight, and cramped that house was. I was never selling that house. And then, once we had a 3rd kid, there was just no way we could justify having 3 kids. I bought that house when I was single. There was just no way we could have 3 kids in that small house. So, I had to bite the bullet and get a bigger house with a higher interest rate. So, anyway, going back to your point, Paul.
Yeah, Manny wanted to kick me out, I guess. He's like, "Get out of
Yeah.
here." I don't know what happened, but we were talking about leadership,
Mhm.
and I am from everything I've learned and observed for people who operate real estate investing businesses at a really high level, they understand that one of the first break points is probably leadership. And I hear a lot of people in the whale club, and myself included, who have struggled to keep people, right? It's a little like a
Mhm.
revolving door. They just come in and out, in and out, in and out. Well, it could be because you have a break point in leadership, right? It might mean that you have to elevate as a leader, and that might mean investing in that. It might mean, you know, sometimes you just got to do it longer. I think that's kind of
Mhm.
what I found. I've gotten better at it the longer I've done it. Um,
Yeah.
but first of all, I think at 3, to go from 1 to 3, it's about you becoming the leader that you need
Mhm.
in order to go from 3 to 10. And I'm speculating because I've never done that. But what I hear and I observe from people who have done that is that they start to realize that because every time you add a new, report, you add 4 hours to your day. And with 10 people, you can't just be sitting around managing people all day long. You have to start enabling leaders inside of your company and building them up to become leaders, right? And so there is a million ways we could look at how to fix, or I should say, deal with scaling a business, growing a business, and it's fairly predictable when it's going to break. But those were some of the notes that I said. Is like it came down to leadership for me. I had
Mhm.
to become the leader that I needed in order to have that type of a team. And I would imagine if I was to grow the business past that to 10, it's not about me becoming, you know, 3, 4 times the leader that I am. And that might be the case. You might need to do that, but you also have to start enabling people inside of your company to step up and become leaders themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things that I've been so passionate about as far as personal development is trying to be the best leader I can be. And one of the things that really helped a lot, again, I mentioned Larry Edge earlier. Hiring him as a consultant to mentor not just me. So, December of 2021, Gary Harper was in our office, and he was like, "Steve, it's time for you to step out. Look at your business here. It's time for you to step out." To which I said, "I'm not ready to step out." He's like, "Why not?" I says, "I've literally sat in every seat in every company, right? And all the companies we're looking at, I've literally sat in every seat. I cannot just pop out of it, right?"
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, you're gonna have to do it." I said, "Okay, for me to feel good, I need just one more training to have someone come in and train all the leaders within all my organizations." We hired again. Hired the former Navy SEAL, and when he came in and he taught my team leadership, it's like, "You want to be part of it?" I was like, "Yeah, I want us all to be on the same page." And I started learning. I was like, "Wow, I was really short on leadership. I thought I was pretty good. I thought I was doing pretty good, but definitely not Navy SEAL good." And so grew a lot last year in that as well. So I think to your point, just you're saying like how much you have to grow as a leader. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the spectrum is, but where I thought I was in 2021 was not good enough, and it took 2022 really to the growth in 2022 to survive the winter we've been talking about.
Mm. Yeah. No, it's really good. Leadership was a big one. I've got a couple others that we can sort of touch on as we sort of wrap the show up here.
Mhm.
First thing I said is you gotta recognize you're going to have to constantly reinvent your business. That's a given. If you're don't be the turkey, as we kept saying, right? The second
Yeah.
thing is I noticed that leadership was a big bottleneck. And the bottleneck at the beginning is you becoming a leader for your team. As you grow, that changes to you enabling your team to become leaders.
Right.
That is a different thing from 1 to 3 than from 3 to 10. So recognize that's probably coming. The second, I guess the third, I don't know, whatever number we're on, but be strategic about your reinventions, which means sometimes you might need to overbuild. Sometimes you might say, well, knowing that we're at 4 deals a month, 5 deals a month, and we're going to get to 10, but I don't have the resources. It's kind of like the little, like the levers,
Hmm.
you gotta, another way Dan would say this is optimize before you maximize. Don't try to do everything all at once. You might say, well, it's good enough for now, but I can't do everything in the business at the same time. So, you know, if you're going to pour in triple the marketing efforts, what's the most likely thing to break? Let's go fix that. It might mean, yes, this probably will break at a certain point, but we got to optimize for the most important thing right now. So, that's something I'm constantly trying to remind myself of, is you got to be strategic. As we're growing our whale club community, I've got to be strategic about what we work on. Anybody who's come in to our free side of our community knows, it's a little bit disorganized at the moment, if I'm admitting, right? Because I'm optimizing for the whales, right? We're optimizing for the people who have paid to join our community. And again, I don't mind giving insights into the businesses that we're building. This is the real world stuff here, right? Like we can't do everything. So what is most important right now? It's the success of the people who are in our community, who have paid to be in our community. That's the most important thing to me. So that's where I'm spending my time. But it also means that eventually other things are also going to break. And if you're not spending time on the front end stuff, well, you're going to have this big slump. And so it just comes down to, like, you got to optimize for the most important thing. Don't try to maximize and do everything all at once, but be strategic about what you're going to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things that quotes or phrases I've heard in the years that hopefully kind of like hammers at the point here. So Jim Collins in Good to Great talks about productive paranoia. Got to operate with productive paranoia. Andy Grove, one of the founders of Intel, one of the I think the title of his book was "Only the Paranoid Survive." Right? We got to plan with paranoia, and that might sound crazy. And again, guys, we got the cheat sheet. Go to whaleclubfreestuff.com. If you guys want to do the wealth assessment, it's free. We charge nothing for it, but I think from what my own personal opinion, I'm biased. I think it is the best compilation for financial development that's free, right? You could go out and hire a coach. You can go get a consultant. This is everything I put together is what I put together. We're not charging for it, but if you go through it and complete it, you're going to get clarity on where you want to go, clarity on where you are today, clarity on how fast you're going to where you want to go, and then also things to evaluate that might be good or bad in your business that may be hindering or helping you get where you want to go. So wealthevaluation.com, check that out. Hopefully that helps you guys as well.
Yeah, you got to know where you got to have clarity first. And that's what we talk about in the Whale Club is got to have clarity. Last thing for how to deal with the rule of 3 of 10. And again, we only have an hour. So I have a million other things that I could think of, but I'm going to reference another one of Dan's principles, which is that we only innovate where we differentiate. There's a lot of people who have grown and scaled real estate investing businesses. And part of why I get so much value out of relationships and masterminds and learning from other people is that we don't need to reinvent everything. Oftentimes, we can take what's worked and copy. And I know that, like, in school, we were told, like, you're not supposed to copy, but that's crazy. Why would we spend all this time and energy copying something like we don't differentiate with how we pull data, let's say? You don't necessarily, maybe you do. Point is like, you don't want to spend your time on things that you don't need to. You should only be spending your time on areas that you can innovate. So you might have a small way to tweak the way that you pull data. You might have a small way to tweak the way that you lead your team or the way that you build out your CRM and all of the automations related to that. But I bet you the majority of it is copy and paste from what other successful people who have come before you and have built and scaled these types of businesses. Why not take what they're doing, plug it right in to your business? If you've decided that this is the game you're going to play and that this fits with your solvable problem, and clarity is important. Now we've got clear on what we want and we're going out and we're trying to build this business. Why do you need to come up with some fancy way to do your accounting? Do you really differentiate in that? Or should you just go out and copy what's already working for those people and spend your time innovating in places where you do differentiate? You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. I mean, our sales changed when we started copying a sales process that works
yeah.
versus trying to figure it out on our own. And then, why does school look down upon people copying answers? Well, the good thing is people listening to this podcast are probably not the kids that did well in school, because if you're an entrepreneur, good chance you get a little bit of shiny object syndrome. You weren't paying attention anyway. You're going to copy and paste school answers anyway. It's now encouraged in entrepreneurship. So,
This is your permission to go copy what works,
yeah,
right? Stop trying to spend your time on areas where you don't differentiate. Go out and find the best person in the field. Comes back to also this idea of T learning versus I learning. It means, there's a lot of businesses and out there that do accounting. There's a lot of businesses out there that do digital marketing, and instead of trying to innovate in the process and all these different things, if you don't differentiate, why not just copy? Right?
yep,
So as you're growing your business from 3 to 10, you can anticipate, or from 1 to 3, you can anticipate a lot of these breakpoints. And a couple ways you can mitigate that, again, as we talked about, is one, know that they're coming. Don't be the turkey. Don't be surprised when your business breaks after you get to a certain point. Prepare for it. That's what good business owners do. Second thing is, it's a leadership thing. Like, it oftentimes means you have to develop as a leader, and then it becomes you have to develop your team as leaders. It's more a personal anecdote for myself. I'm sure that's true for a lot of people listening, but that was true for me. Um, be strategic about your reinventions, and only and optimize for the most important thing. Don't try to maximize and do everything all at once. It's a good way to spin yourself out and then not do any of them very well. Go optimize for the most important thing at that time. And then lastly, only innovate where you differentiate. If you don't differentiate, then just copy. Copy what's already working. The best way to find out what's working is to get around people who are doing the businesses that you want to do. That's why we're such advocates for masterminds and community in general, because you can get around people who have already solved that problem and you can just benefit from their effort. As Randy Massengale likes to say, go to school on our tuition. It means, like, you don't have to pay for tuition. We've already gone, we've made the mistakes. A lot of
hmm
people, and I say we, is like the community, most of the time that you're involved with, they've made the mistakes. Just go copy what they've done.
yep, exactly right. And then just to finalize that point, is just resources are limited, resources are scarce. You got to be the most effective and efficient as you can with your resources. So with that, we'll wrap up, and then we will see you guys next week. Bye, everyone.